it's more than just the aspect of sex, even as we talk about sex as ritual or sex as a devotional act. It's so much more than just actually sex. It's about...
For me, that's another element of the ritualistic nature of sex prayers.
That's why. And then people will also be like, damn, I need some of that for myself.
Just going to slide that in there.
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't mind?
No.
Okay.
Next time I want you to ask permission beforehand, though.
You're right. I should have. My apologies.
I'm like, well, you're already doing it, so
Next
if
time...
I was going to be violated, that would have already happened.
I feel like we've reached a point where I can just slide that in.
It's implied consent here.
Some implied consent going on, yeah.
I love it. Well, that's an episode for another day.
That is an episode for another day.
Yeah.
We can talk about implied consent. Definitely talk about implied consent another day.
Yeah. What did you want to talk about today?
I would like to talk about sex as ritual. I think that's... Is that what we were... Is that what we were going to do? I forgot.
Sex as ritual / I would say, like, the art of devotion. And we were going to talk a little bit about yesterday, too, because we were going to do an afterglow, and the universe was like, no, just savor this moment for yourselves, which I actually really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too.
And
I'm grateful.
Yeah, I feel like that's like such a lead-in because that's so fresh on our minds, definitely on my body. And it's so fresh on my body.
Really?
Hey,
You still feel?
Yeah.
Oh.
Feeling full. I woke up feeling full. Feeling lush.
Yeah.
Yeah, revitalized, some new energy. I like that. And I feel like the more that we talk into it, people will be like, that's why. And then people will also be like, damn, I need some of that for myself.
Yeah. Well, that's the intention, right?
Yeah.
Is to invite people to see the other side, a different side of us, the intimate side, as an invitation to perhaps find that in their life. Whether
partnered or solo. Yeah, there's so many ways to explore sex as ritual. And I'm curious, like, what is ritual to you? Because sometimes this word's like a little taboo, or for the people who are not super in the woo-woo space, ritual can seem a little culty. Yeah, so like...
Occulty.
All of it. Which it is, it's all of it, right? So I'm curious, like, how you define ritual.
Thank you. To me, it's taking time to acknowledge the divine element of the practice, and for the practice to be somewhat in service to or in appreciation of that divine element. So it's the transcendental nature of the intimacy. It's not just this immanent you and me, or me by myself experience. It's finding the divine in it. And that's what makes it ritual. This kind of communication between the human experience and the divine nature of existence.
I love that. There's a word you said in there that is part of my definition of ritual, which is just practice. Right? It's a practice. And it does become an art form, because every ritual, or I think even if our audience thinks of like a sport or something like that, you practice to get better at it, and you practice to get more dialed in. Essentially, you're tuning that frequency and how you cultivate that frequency. And I feel like those are big components in creating ritual. Is what's the energy I want? What's the energy I'm coming with? What's the energy I desire to explore? And what are the different ways in which I'm going to choose to do so in this particular ritual, aka practice? Right?
Okay. So it's the alchemical nature of it. The
totally
transformational, I've forgotten the word, but that transmutation, transmutation element of I'm coming into this practice with a certain energy, and through the practice, I have the intention of moving it.
Yeah.
So that's what the ritual aspect is for you.
Yeah, it's alchemy.
Alchemy.
It's alchemy. It's play. It's always with purpose, but sometimes it has deeper purpose. Like maybe the purpose is more of the focus, and it feels like there's a goal or a line that I'm walking. Other times it gets to be this like beautiful gray area that I could dabble in anything that I want and kind of pick and choose the energies that I want to play with. So I think it's just the difference between setting a specific intention versus dropping into an energetic and seeing what comes alive.
Okay, so your ritualistic practice may sometimes have an intention, and other times it may just be an observation of what is.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you know which one to go for?
I just choose whatever's alive for me in the moment. It's very intuitive.
Okay.
So if I know there's something that I want to work on or work through, then I'll bring that into my rituals. But I don't want to, just because it feels like I'm not working on anything, which is never really true. But, you know, if my ego's like, no, we're all good. Everything's clear. We're not healing. It's all good. Then it can be so quick for me to skip ritual because I'm like, I'm all good. I don't need it. But that doesn't mean there's nothing to explore. Yeah. And so sometimes that just means like, okay, well, I'm going to do ritual because it's a part of my personal practice. And it helps connect me to mind and body. There might be things there that I'm not recognizing are occurring until I drop into rituals. Like, oh, actually, that subtle energy shift that I felt at 1 p.m. today, oh, that was actually that. Ritual gives me space to explore that.
Okay, so it sounds like ritual is a part of your everyday in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what about sex as ritual for you?
It's ritual in the sense that it's an opportunity to drop in more to these beautiful landscapes that are our bodies. And looking at sex from a place of, I want this to feel like a ritual. I want this to feel like where I can come into sex and I can lower my shields. I know that I'm safe and I get to be playful and explore different aspects of myself or my sexuality. And knowing that it's a ritual to me immediately equals that it's a safe space because those are the type of rituals that I hold for myself. So there's no shame, there's no judgment in those spaces. And that feels really valuable for me around sexuality because modern day society is filled with shame and judgment around how people relate and identify with their sex and their sexuality. So bringing ritual into a bedroom setting that includes sexuality just feels like another chapter of exploration of self and other, or just self, or just other. But I think even what we found yesterday, you know, what we found yesterday was like, even though the devotion was towards me, there was still so much for you to gain out of that experience.
Sure, yeah.
And so, yeah, everything's mirroring everything. So I never really believe that anything is driven by one particular side. It's always in unison, whether we see it or not.
Yeah, I don't know if it can be. Or maybe it can, but there's the implied duality of the experience in partnership because there's two entities involved.
Yeah.
What about your ritual in the solo sense? It's I mean, you had a ritualistic solo sexual practice before our connection. Would you mind like talking into that?
Yeah, it's just like personal love practices, honestly. So, like sometimes they're sexual, sometimes they're not. It's just, for me, those moments are more about exploring myself and my body and really dropping into my body about what it needs and wants and desires in the moment. And so it's typically a process of, I'll light candles if it's at night, or even if it's during the day, I might have a little tea candle just so I'm evoking the fire element. Lighting a candle, setting the mood, getting my space in the way that I want it.
When you say the fire element, what do you mean by that, and why is that
Just
important
like a creative element.
Creative.
But
okay,
also
thank
heat.
you.
And I want to bring heat
Yeah, you do.
to my body. Yeah. And so just working with that, like that creative energy. And for me, that creative energy just reflects on, okay, I'm showing up with this. I would love to transmute it, alchemize it, manifest it into this. And then using my connection with myself and the needs and desires of my body to work with that energy. So if doubt is present, then I'll spend that pleasure practice working through the doubt and finding pleasure in the doubt, finding the wisdom of the doubt, while I may be sensually touching myself or potentially even self-pleasuring, where it's like, I'm feeling blocked here, and finding different ways that I can release that stuck or stagnant energy.
Okay.
And the thing that just makes it a ritual is that it's my safe space. It's a sacred ceremony for me to connect to myself. And even in sex with partnership, it still is that. I'm not having sex just to connect with you. I want to connect with me also.
Right.
It becomes a vessel for that on a different level.
Yeah, so I'm hearing it's this practice of communion and communication to primarily, well, initially see what's alive, and then to allow transmutation, allow alchemy.
And sometimes it doesn't always have to be about a thing, you know. I think rituals sometimes, at least in my own experience, would get caught up in, I've got to transmute something, you know, and sometimes there isn't anything that's top of mind or top of body. And so it just gets to be an opportunity to play with myself, like my spirit, my body, my pleasure.
To be present in that.
Yeah, and just like love myself in that. I'm like, oh, amazing. We're not working through anything. This is epic. Let's drop into ritual for that.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't always have to be this like reaching for the surface. Like, okay, I need ritual to get me out of this rut. It's like, no, I actually want to manifest on that energy too. That gets to be a good vibe also.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting aspect of a lot of, I don't know, spiritualists. Or what I see is this constant need to be poking at the shadow, and not just an appreciation and enjoyment of the light. So.
Yeah. I mean, I see it in my clients actually, where it's like, okay, on to the next one. I'm like, can we just love and appreciate the fact that you just got over that shadow? Can you bask in that glory, or are you just like wanting to go to war all the time? Because that's what it feels like.
Wow.
It's like, nah, next layer. Next layer. But then they're also met with this energy that's like, well, I'm emotional all the time. It's like, well, yeah, we're going into battle. Every session. Do you want to have a celebration session in there somewhere? Like, can we honor the process and the progress also? So rituals do not always have to be this, like, okay, we're going in the deep dark. Like, it also gets to be like, let's explore this like heartfelt, open space too.
Well, that's so interesting because, you know, sexual practice to me doesn't have necessarily or particularly that shadow connotation to it. That's not to say that it doesn't for people, and you know, it brings things up. Was it yesterday or the previous the previous sex prayers practice that we had, that stuff came up for you during it and you were able to work through that stuff in surrendering? And
a little bit of that yesterday. I feel like what you're referencing was the other day, but
there was some yesterday.
Yeah, there was some yesterday too. Not that it's like it really took me out of the moment. It's just the more that I spend in a state of embodying receptivity, the more information I get just from the ways in which my body responds or doesn't respond. And when I tune into like the timeline of why that is, sometimes it's always so interesting to see what shows up. Like yesterday was more around when I gave myself permission to not meet you in sexual energy, aka just like grind with you and engage with you, and I actually just let myself completely surrender, which just ended up me being like low-key lifeless in my body. There wasn't really anywhere for me to go because of being tied up.
Because you were tied up.
Because you tied me up.
Shibari fun.
Yeah. So there wasn't anywhere for me to go. And I could find that even though I was tied up, there was these parts of me that were still wanting to move and still trying to like maybe be a little bratty or wiggle with you or grind on you. And at some point, I tuned in and was like, I don't want to do that. And there was a part of me that maybe felt like guilty or bad for that. That was like, oh, well, does this mean you don't want to participate? It's like, no, I just wonder what it's like to just actually allow every fiber of my being to relax and just receive and see how, if that even changes my experience. And it totally was. Like, it was such a different experience than when I was trying to act with you and I was trying to meet you as best I could, considering being tied up. That was actually taking away from my experience.
In what way? Was it
me trying to meet you was taken away from my experience?
In the sense that of what you were feeling?
Yeah. Physically, it felt different. And then just receiving you, right? Because there was a part of me that was in action still, as opposed to just in receptivity where I'm soft in my body. I'm not clenched anywhere. Like when I'm trying to meet you and I'm tied up, so many muscles are working to try to get to that spot, including just like a clenching inside, internally. And so then to actually just go, okay, I'm going to lay back. It reminded me of like the Bufo thing where I couldn't do anything but surrender. I was like, okay, let's tap into that energy and see what happens when I completely surrender and relax. And I noticed right away that I felt you differently. But more than that, it was that the experience that I was having was deeper and more erogenous because there was nothing fighting you. I say fighting, like, you know.
Action against.
Yeah.
It sounds like in surrendering, you're really dropping into the essence of femininity and letting go of the masculinity of taking action.
Yeah, right? Like, I'm tied up. Like, why should I be trying to take any action? Unless I am actively trying to be a brat and I'm trying to fight you off and any of that. But that was not my energy yesterday.
No.
You know, not at all. And so it was this moment of, who do I want to be in this moment? And how do I want to feel in this moment? I was like, oh, I want to feel relaxed and I want to just surrender to this. Like, he tied me up so I could surrender in theory, you know? I mean, like, maybe you wanted me to, like, fight you a little bit or something, but
no.
It didn't feel like that was, the energy. And so giving myself permission to do that.
And I'm so curious to know how that felt different. Like, I don't understand. And I imagine it's difficult to put into words. But...
Yeah, totally. It's such a felt experience. I mean, it's the difference of, if you think about this element of bracing, and they talk about bracing in trauma, which is like kind of where you're walking around and you're constantly in a state of hypervigilance. So everything's tight and everything's tense because you never know when a threat might strike, right? So your nervous system is prepared for that. It's the energy of bracing, which is like tightening and contracting, as opposed to releasing. Like if you think about squeezing your leg muscle and you're contracting it and then you release it, it feels different. That's exactly what it's like. But in my yoni and just in my total body in general, like, it's okay, I'm not going to put in any work and I'm not going to put in any effort, right? I'm just going to lay here, like just completely lifeless and allow you to penetrate me. Of course it feels different, just like if you receive a massage when your muscles are tight versus when they're loose. It's such a different sensation.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I can, thank you. That giving me context. I can totally understand the difference, especially the muscle tension and relaxation with regards to massage. And the interesting thing that came up for me there was during sexual practice, so evidently and obviously in a masculine energetic, which is about contraction and holding on. And so the thing that came up was no wonder men... I don't want to speak in general, but there's the societal connotation that men are seeking the orgasm is because that is the moment of surrender and release. That is them experiencing that letting go.
Totally.
And that's
the only time in the sexual experience they might get to do that, in theory.
In theory.
Right. In a physical sensation.
But this is the interesting thing. So for me, the exciting thing in sexual practice is playing with and finding that feminine surrender in the masculine action.
What would that look like?
I think partly that alludes to the energetic orgasm. Also to the surrender of expectation, the surrender for physical orgasm, and finding the softness in being able to penetrate. Like it doesn't need to be this is the thing, this is the challenging thing. There's the innate need for it to be a sense of holding on. Like even maintaining an erection, there's this need for contraction, but then also finding an element of surrender and release in that, so it's not so it can be enjoyed, I guess.
And even in the masculine experience, it'd be so interesting for men to, when they're in a sexual experience, to just tune in to the body. That's like, well, am I holding tension anywhere? Because even the relaxation of that, men don't also realize that by contracting their body, even though mentally they might be thinking that it's helping hold the erection, it might actually be preventing a whole other avenue of pleasure that's available, because there's so much directive energy isn't going that way. It's like, oh.
Sure. Well, this is the energetic orgasm. I would say it's finding that space, that place, that state of surrender in particular places to allow the energy to move through the body, but maintaining the necessity of particular contraction and tension.
And playing with that.
And playing with that, yeah.
I feel like that should be the funnest, best part. And I see there's so much disappointment that tends to show up in the bedroom. For example, like when erections are lost, like it's such an interesting experience where women wonder if everything's okay. They wonder if it's about them, if they did something wrong. Men wonder what women are thinking. Can I not keep it up? Like there's such a dialogue internally that happens from that experience. Sure. When really that just can be an experience to play in other ways and rebuild that arousal.
Right.
And there's so much space to play in sex.
And all of that requires such good communication and trust and honesty to be able to have that level of understanding, that empathy, that communication to say, oh, this is what's going on in my body right now, and this is also what's going on in my head. I'm feeling like I'm gonna be judged for this, or I'm worried that there's something wrong with me. And
it creates so much intimacy because there's emotional vulnerability in those shares.
It can create intimacy if those involved are willing to have those dialogues. Otherwise, it can create.
And it's open.
Otherwise, it creates just tension and suffering.
Yeah, people have to be willing to and open to receive in a heart-centered space. That's something that I appreciate about our connections, is that when or if things like that do show up, we know that we can express it, that there's no better time to express it.
Yes, than live.
Yeah, than in that moment. So we can be met. So if I'm experiencing something like I did a couple days ago, which wasn't even anything major, it was more of just like a revelation that I was having about myself in the moment, expressing it, and me feeling like, oh, maybe that's going to take us out of the mood or just take us into conversation and out of like sexy play.
Yeah.
But then realizing like, no, this is such a perfect opportunity because that gives you an opportunity to meet me where I'm at, which ultimately, right, that's kind of what we're looking for in intimacy, is we want to feel met in intimacy. And so if I held that back and maybe never shared it, we could have gone on having an experience, but maybe it wasn't the most fulfilling experience for me because I wasn't being honest with myself in the experience.
Sure. And there's two things that come up for me there is, one, in allowing yourself to express that, you invite the alchemy of it, the transmutation of it. Otherwise, you just hold on to it and it doesn't go anywhere. And two is that, for me, this is the ritual element of the practice. Yeah. The divine communion in expression of what is.
Yeah, like what is. There's so... I just like, my body shudders thinking about it. There's so much information that comes online every moment. Our body's receiving so much. Like, I'm receiving sensation now. I mean, besides you, like, playing with me with your foot. Just like the room, electronics, like, my body's receiving everything. Candles, like our altar, I'm receiving. And when I'm present with that, that's what feels like my core truth. You know, is I get to be in the moment, the only moment that I have until the next moment arrives, and offering that to the altar, which is our union, each other, the altar that is myself and my own body and my own soul, the room, my practice, sex. Like, it's more than just the aspect of sex, even in, as we talk about sex as ritual or sex as a devotional act. It's so much more than just actually sex. It's about me and my desires meeting you and your desires, having open lines of communication to continue to ebb and flow and find each other in that space, in love in that space. And if for some reason we couldn't, let's say there was just a disagreement or something was a little off, that also being okay, and to take space and re-enter that space when we are able to and feel emotionally adept to be in that space.
And for me, that speaks into the importance of the mindset that the ritualistic practice of, you know, sexual exploration is about exploration of truth first, primarily, that then invites pleasure. It's not about a focus on pleasure first, because with the focus on pleasure, it's so easy to lose sight of the authenticity of the moment. And I feel like that's important to say. That's a part of the sex prayers, sex as devotion, sex as ritual aspect, is remembering that. And I think that's really what's missing from most people's sexual practices and why they're not ritualistic. Because from my experience and my understanding of society and people that I know, is that sex is about pleasure. It's not about ritual. Whereas if you see sex as ritual, it can lead to pleasure.
So much pleasure. And this even kind of goes back to our conversation when we were having lunch yesterday around our sensual night that we had, where sex wasn't, it was on the table, but kind of not really. We wanted to intentionally create a space that didn't lead to that, and you opened the door for me to guide us there, lead us there if I wanted it.
I gave you the power to do that.
And we ended up just having a sensual evening. It's like the connections that we had there and the intimacy that we shared there were so powerful that, of course, that could lead into sex as ritual. Because all of this, my intention and my purpose for, well, I guess anything that I do, is like, I want to feel the expansion. Like, okay, great. I want to expand on my ability to love. I want to expand on my ability to understand. I want to expand my emotional depth. And these spaces, whether they're with you or with myself, create opportunities where I get to peel back the layers and also be with what is and feel that, like, even just mini expansion and contraction of connection and the power that I get from any time I drop into ritual or devotion, because naturally things will come up.
Things will come up in any experience.
In any experience, but especially if I'm dropping into ritual or devotion with an intention, I'm there because I want to examine whatever I feel like is limiting my expression of that particular thing. So if it's sex, like, what's limiting my expression of sex? And then I kind of start to go down the timeline of, okay, well, what would that be? It's like, oh, okay. I had a rough day today, and so that's actually making it challenging to drop into my body. Oh, I'm noticing that when you tie me up, there's this element that's like, well, I don't actually know if I'm safe here. That didn't happen. But that could be an example.
Yeah.
And so noticing like, oh, okay, if I drop into ritual to explore, what is blocking me
Okay.
from the expansion or the fullness of my expression?
Yeah.
How can I work with that? And ritual becomes that space.
Okay. So it's a safe space for you to investigate what is alive for you through the experience that you're inviting into your field. And then to explore that in the moment individually, and then when it feels right to share that collectively. Because, you know, like our sensual evening the night, I had no idea that the thoughts you were having around the edge of being bound was something that was alive for you. I didn't know that until you shared it afterwards, and I'm grateful that you did. And I guess there's a curiosity around sharing something in the moment and sharing something after the moment. But I guess
there's an art to it.
There's an art to it, and also there's a trust in it. Like, I trust you to express anything you feel is necessary to express, and I am fully aware of your capability to deal with anything within yourself that doesn't need me to deal with it. So yeah, I feel like there's an interesting art to that, because it's something you could have shared and expressed in the moment, and it would have been received, obviously, but you didn't need to.
Yeah, and there was a part of me that I wanted to sit with it. I felt the edge come up, and rather than immediately be reactionary, it's like, oh fuck, I don't. I'm having this moment where I feel like I actually can't get out of this.
Yeah.
I wanted to be with that. I wanted to be with that sensation, and my intuition knows that I can trust this space, and so it's great to have that. Which is why I feel like the trust piece is so important. I trust myself, and I trust you.
Yeah.
And so just to be with that experience and witness myself in the experience, it's like, oh, interesting that this fear is coming online, even though I know that I trust you. And there was like no fear of being taken advantage of in a taken negative energetic kind of way.
Sure.
And then just being with it, and I was like having an inner conversation with that part of myself and getting to like a regulated state that's like, oh, it's all good. Like, that's the point. You're not supposed to be able to get out of it. It's like, play with this, you know, like getting that part of me on my side, knowing that's like, hey, we're safe. If there was ever a moment where you didn't feel safe, I know that I can express that to you. And that became my foundation. It was like, if this was to persist and I felt like I couldn't shake it, then I would vocalize it.
Right. Yeah.
But it was interesting. I was like, rather than bring it to the table right away and react to it, I was like, I just want to sit with this sensation, because that's really what builds resilience and our ability and capacity to hold sensation in general.
Right.
So if I couldn't hold you doing that, there's no way I would have been able to hold yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, the whole time just would have been a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was nice because I had that moment. I let myself be with it. I accepted it. I poured love into it. I mean, it wasn't even that big of a deal. And then, of course, I feel like the progression of that is the openness to be able to receive yesterday.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what we did yesterday? Do you want to talk about your experience of yesterday? I feel like I've shared a lot about my experience.
Yeah. I would love to. Before I do, I just wanted to, before I forget it, is thank you for sharing all of that and for sharing so much of your experience.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. And it brought up for me the importance of the integration piece, which is essentially the afterglow.
Yeah.
To actually to sit with the experience, reflect on it, and take something from it.
I love that that's a part of our ritual.
Right,
Our afterglow
exactly.
is
Yeah.
a part of our ritual. It's the aftercare.
Yes. Yeah.
Aftercare is so important, y'all.
And that's, for me, that's another element of the ritualistic nature of sex prayers, of sex as ritual. It's making time for that integration space, individually and collectively. Because we've just been on this cosmic journey together. Yesterday was for 4 hours.
It's so long. I remember the joke of she's like, well, when we drop into sex, we drop into sex. I was like, we better just cancel our afternoon and evening plans.
Yeah, I love that. Not that sex as ritual has to be 4 hours.
No, just ours tends to be.
It tends to be. Hey, when you're going into...
And I love that about us.
Yeah, me too. I love that. I love that we have the capacity and ability to actually to do that. It means a lot to me. It's something that I value so much when it comes to sexual connection and sexual expression. And so getting the opportunity to fully express myself in this relationship is really, really nice.
I feel like yesterday was a good expression of that. It was a good session of your expression. Yeah,
absolutely. And then the afterglow, aftercare, I equate it, and the way I see it is, this is tantamount to a medicinal journey. It is stepping out of everyday reality into this divine, transcendental experience of sexual connection. That's the vessel. To recognize, to commune with something beyond the egoic sense of self, to have understandings, to have these enlightenments, and then to not have integration in a medicinal journey is, for me, missing a huge part of the experience.
Yeah, so it's where all the wisdom actually shows up.
Right. So why would you not do that in this setting?
Yeah.
In this practice, in this
yeah.
cosmic, this natural cosmic medicine that we've been bestowed the ability to experience.
Yeah, I want afterglows for everybody. They're so special. They're so special. Aftercare. I feel like aftercare is just like what you're talking about, a missing experience that has just either been forgotten, or people didn't even realize, like, wait, we can have aftercare? Like, what is aftercare?
Yeah.
What does
or
that
no
even
time
mean?
for.
No time for.
Yeah.
And creating time for those. That's a check-in, right? That's like, even if our experience wasn't 4 hours, I mean, I feel like a 4-hour experience definitely has integration naturally. But even if they're shorter experiences where we're engaging in something new, or we're playing, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm in an emotional process, I'm a woman, that I can express where I'm at even afterwards. I think that's the whole point of connection, whether it's sexual or non-sexual, is the ability to be with what came up, what is, and continue to move forward in a unified way. And I feel like the afterglow, which is what we call aftercare, is such a piece for that. It's like, wow, I got to express all of the ways that I was having little experiences yesterday, and I got to hear about your experience, because in the moment, we're not...
No,
unless
not
we
communicating.
pause, unless we take a sacred pause, we're not communicating. We're just in the act of devotion. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
So what inspired you yesterday? What inspired you to drop into that experience?
Okay. I want a sacred pause.
Sacred pause.
Sacred pause. Where does it want? Does it want to go in there?
I don't know.
No?
I don't know.
Up in there?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So I want to know, Yeah, what inspired yesterday for you?
Well, we'd had this really beautiful day up until that point. We had an intimate sexual encounter in the morning. We then shared an afternoon of art and creativity and sensual sensual stimulation through the art, visual and auditory, through food, through the city and moving around. And for me that was really, really lovely. And then when we got back, we enjoying a period of cuddling, and then I had the desire to explore my curiosity around the Shibari that we've been intrigued by recently.
Yeah.
And so gone onto YouTube and started going through videos on how to tie knots. And then that just naturally progressed to, well, in my defense, I'm pretty sure you invited me to try tying some of those.
I said, let's practice. I was like, let's practice. And I was thinking this whole time, you guys, I was like, cool, he's going to practice a knot on me. I'm going to practice some knots on him. We're going to go back and forth. No, he just straight tied me up. Like, once he got my wrist, he was like, oh, yeah, we're going into this space.
That wasn't, my intention was nothing around like, okay, I'm going to drop into a 4-hour experience now. Yeah. It was purely like very much in the moment. It's like,
that's so true.
It was so organic.
Yeah.
And I loved that. So
I remember thinking at one point, I was like, I've been here for like 30 minutes. And I was like, are we going to actually switch? Or what should I do in this moment? And yeah, it was just so funny.
Well, thank you for allowing yourself to just surrender into the experience.
Yeah, that's what came up. I was like, just like, are you not enjoying yourself? I was like, no, I am enjoying myself. I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, then let it be what it is. There was a moment where I could feel maybe this part of me that wanted to try to control it. That's like, well, I want to tie you too, and I want to learn these knots and all of that. But yeah, my inner voice was like, no, let's just like play with this and see where this goes. And it ended up being a 4-hour sensual, explorative,
and sexual
session. Yeah.
And so ended up binding all of your limbs, which was very sexy. And in that state of surrender, which I'm recognized you were offering me, I had the opportunity to worship at the altar of you. Yeah. And
you did.
And I did.
We talked about that. It was so interesting where even though, the experience inherently, I do believe, was for both of us to enjoy.
Sure, I was definitely touching you for my pleasure.
Yeah, like you were in this like amazing taking energy, but also like giving because just like you love to give anyways more naturally. And I think it's interesting to be in a space where you got to dabble in both. And I also got to surrender and receive. Which was amazing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I know that he's doing this for him because, like, it's his kink and it's his turn on. And I could totally hear that you were having such a good time, it's just, like, the different sounds that you would make. I was like, oh, he's enjoying himself. And I got to enjoy myself, too. Yeah.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons this works so well. Yeah. Is because you're a very sensually embodied person. And that invites me to enjoy that through you.
And you got to bring new sensations to my body. Like the way that you were toying with like hot and cold and different sensations. And even the invitation at one point, I know you were using like the tip of the feather, and I was like, I'd actually like a little bit more pressure there, right? I had full permission. If it would have been a different scene or something, maybe I wouldn't have been able to say anything. But in that moment of like, oh, I want that, and that like intrigued you and made you excited, and then you did it, and I noticed I was like, oh yeah, okay, like that's what's bringing like so much sensation to my body. Yeah. Just finding ways to play in that.
Yeah, I got to essentially I got to play with your body.
Yeah, uninhibited.
Yeah, in in allowing it to experience sensation through any tool that I had come to mind to offer. And I loved it. It was so great. It was so it was fun because, I mean, it felt like play. It felt 100% like play.
Yeah.
And I could sense your enjoyment at the stimulation, and that gave me pleasure. And
watching me squirm around as you like take ice around my breasts brought you pleasure? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. Yeah. Like I was laughing so much.
Yeah.
And it's funny because even when I was laughing in that moment, the expression of my laughter wasn't sexual, but it was just like my body is being played with in ways that are so outside the typical day to day.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that you bring that up because, I'd say 90% of your reactions weren't sexually focused. They were sensory focused. And I loved that. And what made it sexual for me was just the context. Like, you're naked and you're in a surrendered state. For me, I don't know, I've been thinking about it, and I think part of what it is that it allows me to really embody and drop into and an invitation to be in pure masculine.
Yeah.
Because I'm being invited by Goddess Feminine to embody that, because she's embodying feminine. And I think, like, for me, that's part of what I enjoy about sexual energetics, sexual exchange, is sitting in that polarity, playing with those polarities. Like, I was being in masculine energy of penetrative, literally and figuratively, taking action, taking charge, but at the same time, sitting in the feminine playfulness of it. And getting to play with that duality is the fun of the ritual for me.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And even for me, just the joy, like what an experience of just coming back to lighthearted pleasure. Because sometimes I feel like sexual containers just come with a pressure, mental, or maybe because there's an expectation or something there. And so to even just be in a space where, oh my gosh, I'm laughing because the sensation is so much. I'm having like such a sensory overload moment. And then getting to laugh about that and just noticing how my body would shift and squirm and it would want more of one and fearing the other. Like anytime I could hear you playing with the ice cube, I could feel my muscles start to go like, fuck, I don't know where or when he's going to touch me. And I would just like start to like mini brace, that is like, that sound
is coming.
And then the tingles would come. I'm like, oh, okay, what's happening, and yeah, just having that experience, I really do feel like opened my body up, of course, just to pleasure in general because I was experiencing such innate joy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm experiencing joy. Of course I'm open. And then when I'm open, of course I can feel you in a different way.
And I think it must have been like an hour plus before we got to sexual contact. Like,
yeah, I'm sure.
True sexual contact. So it's, and yeah, the element of play, for me, that's what it's about. And it goes back to those pillars. And for me, it's the foundation. And I wonder how many people do laugh in the bedroom, do find that element of playfulness. Or if there's this this attachment to expectation. And this is why I think the power of Sex.Prayers, seeing sex as ritual, is important. Because it's for me it's more about enjoyment than it is about pleasure. Pleasure comes.
Does it?
Pleasure comes through enjoyment.
Yeah.
But the focus isn't on the pleasure. It's allowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I loved so much that you were enjoying yourself, and I could see that and experience that in the laughter and the giggling and the responsiveness.
Yeah.
It's great.
Oh, it's amazing.
Mm.
I feel like that's too where the polarity can be used to really benefit. The understandings of polarity can be used to benefit couples in how they relate in the bedroom, because let's say we take off the expectations of anyone getting off or having an orgasm, or we take off any expectation of length, or what the container is supposed to look like. It just becomes an explorative journey. And the thing that I love is like you did that for both of us yesterday, but innately it's for you, right? It's like, I'm enjoying tying her up. I'm going to tie her up even more. Oh, now I'm going to go get these things and I'm going to play with her body, right? It was, even though I was receiving pleasure, it was very much about you. It was like your experience, right? Of what you wanted to create and cultivate with what was alive with you in that moment. And so my surrendered state allowed that experience to be about you. It was never about me, even though ultimately you were worshiping my body. It was still, for me, I still saw it as like your experience, right? You were the lead actor in what we did yesterday. Especially when I chose to just surrender. It's like, okay, cool, you have full control here. What do you want to do with that time, right? That's the energy of what I'm offering to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And feeling like that gives you the opportunity to be in your masculine fully and me be fully in my feminine, where I just got to receive you yesterday.
And what feels like part of the reason why this dynamic is so good is that, you know, if you had done that and been of the mindset of, okay, I'm going to let him enjoy himself, but you weren't enjoying it, I wouldn't have enjoyed it.
Yeah, and that would have just created disruption.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially, if I had done it and I wasn't enjoying it, I'm people pleasing, right? It's like I'm offering an experience to you because there's fear that I'll lose something, right? So it's like, at least that's like how my experiences would have been. So it's like, oh, okay, I won't say anything because he's having a really good time, but I'm not really feeling this. I just ate a bunch of tacos. I'm really full. That could have been the truth yesterday, right? We had amazing tacos. And
did you feel that full?
No. By the time we started playing, no.
Okay.
But like that could have been a truth, right? Where it's like, oh, he's doing this, but I don't want to say no because like he's really enjoying himself, but I'm really full and I'm bloated and blah, blah, blah. I could have been going through so many things, and if I had just let that slide, our experience would have never been the same. It never would have been to the caliber and level that we had yesterday. And that's because I'm not rooted in my truth. I'm not actually honoring the expression of myself in that moment. That's going to be the piece that kills intimacy and that exploration in the first place, is if both people aren't showing up in honesty and in integrity with where they're at and how they're feeling and what they want and what their boundaries are, then of course there's disruption in that experience, because it's not a real experience, right? One party is not allowing their truth to be revealed in that experience, and they're not offering that to the altar, which is the experience, right?
Yes. Points back to the pillars that we spoke about in the previous episode.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it's so important. Like, I don't know if it's possible, tell me what you think, if it's possible to have sex as ritual if the pillars aren't in place.
I think there's space to explore that, but having the pillars, I mean, that creates the foundation for it to exist. And I think that it'd be easy to see if in any moment yesterday I was not communicative. That could have caused an issue. If there was ever a moment that I was not in my truth, that could have caused an issue. Before, after, today, next week, right? If resentment had built.
Yeah.
If I wasn't trusting of you,
Yeah.
that wouldn't have killed that.
Yeah. And if I weren't empathetic towards you in those moments where I checked if you were okay,
Yeah.
that could have led to, missing something.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And so
Cold
it's
tone.
just, I know, they're always
So
chilly.
cold.
So chilly. It just, yeah, I feel like, every episode that we record is going to in some way come back to those pillars because they create the safety that allow us to have and explore those experiences. And should an experience go awry, we can rely on those pillars to support us in how to overcome whatever that thing is.
How to deal with it.
Yeah. And they have to be there. If any one of those things hadn't been there, even including the play, right? If there wasn't an element of play there and I was just kind of like, okay, it would have been a far more boring experience. I wouldn't have had the inner revelations that I had. You wouldn't have been able to have the full experience that you had.
The depth of pleasure.
Totally.
Yeah, 100%. Okay.
And I think that, as we circle back around to sex as ritual and just like the art of devotion, those pillars are the art of devotion. It's like when I'm enacted and when I'm aligned with the values of those 4 plus foundation of play 5 pillars, that's in devotion to myself, first and foremost. I'm in such devotion to my needs, my heart, my soul. So that I can also be open and receptive in your devotion for yourself. And where we meet in the middle, that's our eroticism. That's our chemistry and our synergy. It's what do we want to create from this space? I'm so in my truth and I'm communicating how I'm feeling with you. And you're giving that to me. And then all of a sudden we're just in this, cosmic love bubble. That's just wow, there's so much energy in that.
It's the union of individual altars to create a joint altar that communes with something
higher.
Yeah, I feel that. And deeper.
Yeah.
Okay, so circling back to sex as ritual, the thing that the question that comes to mind is, why do you think people aren't doing that? And why is it important for them to do that?
I feel like there's a part of me that believes that people just don't even recognize that it's available to them. That they can shift the conversation that they have with themselves or their partners in the bedroom. That it's just it is the way that it is, right? And maybe there's not enough access or people talking about it, which is why I'm so happy that we're doing this, is to expose these other ways of relating that get to be easy and playful and fun. And that doesn't mean easy without hardship or challenge. We're human beings. We have egos. Of course, we're going to bump up against each other's egos from time to time.
I hope we bump up against each other.
Oh my gosh. And we have makeup sex afterwards.
More bumping.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe it just,
showing people there's another way.
Yeah, showing people there's another way. I feel like there's a lot of people out there who don't recognize that there is another way. And if they do have this innate feeling or this desire that's there must be another way that I'm just not understanding or I'm not tapping into it. It's almost just a lack of knowledge of well, how would I even implement that? And I feel with our creation of these 4 pillars, it actually breaks it down and makes it so much more simple to see, okay, where in my relationships am I actually out of alignment? What pillar am I not honoring? And what's the story behind that? And, part 2 of that is that conscious intimacy in general and authentic relating, it's real, and not everybody has the inner strength or confidence or resilience to be able to handle an authentic mirror to them and their experience. And so they might avoid that because it's easier to just avoid and neglect and play ignorance than it is to actually be held in an authentic mirror and go, okay, I've got to look at myself and how I'm seen and perceived in this container, and really hold my own internal compass and my own ground should my values actually be in alignment and this person is not receiving that, or wow, I'm actually not, and this person is pointing out areas where I'm out of integrity. Not a lot of people want to go through that challenge.
So yeah, so what I'm interpreting from your words that I'm hearing is that this practice of sex as ritual, conscious intimacy, sex prayers, is one of self-reflection, and it's a practice of inner work.
Yeah.
And that's
inner work first. I mean, it has to be.
And that's why it can be challenging, because if you're not in a space of wanting to do that self-reflection, if you're not in a space of being receptive to the dissolution of that part of your ego construct, okay with sacrificing that part of yourself, that then why would you engage in this kind of practice?
Yeah. Like one of my clients recently, it's like, you know, we've even had this conversation when we dropped in the other day. We had some gummies, and it was like, what are you willing to let go of? And what are you willing to sacrifice to the altar for the change that you want? And that can be the biggest challenge of like letting that part of ourselves die, that maybe that's the only way that somebody knows how to relate to their sexuality, is this certain type of way. And so the fear that comes with, wow, if I'm not that person sexually, who am I? Almost could become this identity crisis. And there's sometimes the fear in that space can take over or overrun the energy of curiosity, which could also show up in that moment. That's like, wow, well, if I'm not that person and I recognize that that version of me is actually out of alignment and in integrity, who do I want to become, and how do I want to shift so that I'm a more aligned being? But the fear can so quickly override that. That's like, you know what, it's actually just safer just to keep being me, and I'll just find the person that meets me in that, and maybe we can both live in an ignorant little bubble, and we settle.
Okay.
And that's fine. There's a percentage of the population that does that.
That's not a bad thing.
No.
Like, we're not,
happiness is the barometer, you know. If you're happy,
it's all good.
Yeah, if you're happy, it's great.
If you're happy and not hurting anyone, then
amazing.
You're doing great.
Yeah. And for the people that are like depth seekers, truth seekers like us, it's like if anytime I came up against challenge with you, right? If anytime I came up against my own ego with you, I was just like, actually, this is uncomfortable to have this conversation, so I'd rather just not have this conversation. And then I start to notice, okay, because I'm not having this conversation, this doesn't really feel in alignment with me. That's kind of how the relationship starts to take shape. It's like, oh, this actually isn't in alignment with me. No, I feel myself getting further and further, and then I leave the relationship. It's actually not that the relationship was not aligned with me. It was like I wasn't fully showing up in the relationship, but it gets masked as, oh, well, this relationship just isn't working. It's like, no, actually, I'm not being honest in the relationship, so I'm not working. Like, I'm not working it.
Well, how can I meet you if I don't know what your truth is?
100%. And it goes back to this whole thing of like, you're not a mind reader. I'm not a mind reader.
I try.
Yeah. And so in these spaces where we get to authentically share, that's an act of devotion for me. Me having access to my voice and sharing that and sharing what's on my heart and what I'm experiencing is an act of self-love and devotion for me. It's become like a non-negotiable for me in how I relate. I will no longer hide my truth for the sake of another person's feelings, because I no longer hold responsibility for another person's feelings. That's their experience. I'm never going to let that hold me back from owning my experience.
Yeah.
And so that's like one example of how the pillars is an act of devotion, and how when I'm so embodied in that truth in my own solo experience, I then get to bring that into union with another person and explore what that is like. Does it work? Doesn't it work?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Your practice of ritual is your communication of honesty with yourself primarily, and then in partnership.
Yeah.
And the thing that came up for me there was, I still feel there's this element of discernment though still around honesty. Like, there's being. Can you be too honest? Like, sometimes you
tone and texture matter.
Well, this is the thing, yeah. Well, tone and texture, and also, like, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now, but I don't need to express that.
No.
Like.
Yeah, discernment is there.
Yeah.
Like me, I could have expressed in the moment what I was experiencing when you tied me up, but
Perfect
I discerned.
example.
I was like,
Yeah.
I want to be with the sensation, and
Yeah.
if it continues, then I will express it.
Yeah.
So there's discernment there. But also I feel like in the healing journey, especially when people are coming out of suppression and oppression, where their voice, they didn't have a voice, or they were told to be quiet or to mute or whatever, then the ricochet of coming out of that is the overly expressed person and
toxic honesty.
Toxic honesty. It's just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I said, so
Yeah.
deal with it. And I love the empowerment and claiming that comes from that energy, because it really is just like, this is live and this is me in the moment. And there's something very pure about that. And of course, we can refine.
Right, yeah.
Right? So it's not reactionary.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
It's a little more humbled. I think that's really, really important. It's just like, be humble. Or those moments where, I think maybe in my past I would say something and I would pop off, and in that moment I would hear myself and I would go, sorry, that one slipped out.
Yeah.
Like, please forgive me.
Yeah.
I was in a reactionary moment.
Yeah, I love that.
Let me go sit with that.
And that's why, and we've spoken about it before, but that's why I think a second tier of pillars, I think discernment is massively one of them. Maybe it's sitting on top of the pillars. I'm not sure yet, but
like, that's actually the second foundation, the second story.
Yeah.
Discernment. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
And I think what you mentioned is the perfect example, where yesterday, in that experience of that surrender piece, you discerned that you didn't need to express that, because you didn't need to make that my truth. Like, you having that experience was your experience, and in that moment it didn't need to be my experience. I'm grateful that it was subsequently when you shared it in Afterglow. So grateful, because I got to understand a part of you deeper and better. And I loved that there was the discernment as to when to express and share that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
Yeah. And that's just me tapping into my own inner voice in that moment. That's like, I hear something get activated in my nervous system. I tune in. If I didn't tune in, that could have manifested in so many different ways.
Sure.
Including reactivity. But the ability to, tune in and go, okay, girl, what's actually happening here? Do you feel threatened? Is that true? It's like, no. Okay. Like, then what do we want to do in this space? And me overriding the sensation that goes, you're safe here. Let's just see what happens when we receive and allow him to play with you. Fully knowing that I was never going to be harmed. I was never going to be, even if any moment I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, untie me. Like, no, you would have had no problem of doing it. You'd be like, are you sure? Da, da, da. Like, you just would have done it.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, coming back to that inner knowing, because we have these pillars, being able to comfort that part of my nervous system in the moment, right? Like, this is also why I feel like regulation, probably again in the second second tier, regulation, self-regulation became so valuable, because I didn't have to. And because I was able to regulate, I was able to then discern, is this something I actually need to bring to the table in the moment or at all, right? I maybe didn't need to say anything, and you would never know, and like, that would be okay, because I'm not at risk of having the same experience. Yeah. Because I cleared it. I worked with it. I alchemized it literally in the moment. It was okay, girl, let's check in. Like, yeah, he's paddling you right now, but we're having this internal tune in, and we're just like, it's all good. It's all good. Like, yeah, great. Okay, amazing, cool. Then I could feel how after that tune in, another layer of relaxation just took over, which is another layer of receptivity.
And it's using the sexual space and the sexual practice to kind of move through the layers of self in that environment to then take that out of that environment and into the world.
Exactly. Like, that is sex magic to me.
Yeah.
That is the epitome of sex magic. It's like, let's bring it to the altar.
Yeah, that's the sex prayers for me.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it. Is there anything you feel like you want to express that you have not expressed yet?
One thing I think is it's something that we ended up speaking about in Tulum because it came up for me. It's like, yesterday was amazing. I loved it. And before yesterday, like when we were back in Tulum, there was this desire in me for all or most of my sexual spaces to look and feel like that.
Like yesterday.
Yeah, it's this is what Sex.Prayers is supposed to look like.
Right.
And if it doesn't look like this, then it's not Sex.Prayers. It's not sex as devotion. It's like not sex as ritual. Yeah. Yeah. And then we had a conversation. You're like, no, the ritualistic part doesn't mean that it has to look like this. It's the intention that you bring to it. It's taking a moment to go, okay, I'm with this, or I'm alchemizing this, or I have this intention. It doesn't have to be like setting up the altar and lighting the candles and saying a prayer and going through a 4-hour ritual. It can be, you can have sex as devotion, sex as ritual, sex prayers in a 10-minute steamy, hot, passionate, yummy experience as much as you can in a 4-hour experience. I'd love you to just say anything that feels alive in that.
Yeah, for me it just comes back to what's the intention of this. And also I feel like just tuning into where a person is at in their own practice, and it's like, what do you want to cultivate? If a person's at the beginning of their relationship journey, or they're coming out of a relationship where they experience heartbreak, then safety might be the first intention. So it's like, great, that creates a container for a person to explore the expansions and contractions that they feel around relating to another person and whether or not they feel safe. If it's flirtatious energy, great, then we get to drop into that as, it's all prayer, right? It's all prayer. Like, everything that we do is prayer for something. And so when we drop into the frequency and wisdom of that, it's like, well, if my actions dictate what it is that I'm cultivating in my life, then what do I want to make myself open for? And life gets to be the ritual, right? Like, life gets to be the prayer, like what I said in the last episode. It's like, I really look at my day-to-day actions, or I do my best to. I'm not a saint yet, but I'm working on it.
Work harder.
No, oh my God.
Pray harder.
Yeah, I know. There's this part of me that just loves sinning. I just can't get over it. That wild child.
And I'm so grateful.
Yeah, you get the polarities of all of it.
Yeah, you little sinner.
Yeah. Miss Kitty's a sinner for sure.
Yeah, she is.
When I recognize that the actions that I take, let me reset. I want to feel so connected to the divine energy of life, and I want to commit to that energy being the most supportive energy I could possibly ever find. I really have a desire, and I'm working towards a deeper embodied belief of that. And what that says to me is that when I choose my actions from attunement and from a deep trust of my intuition, then every action that I take gets to be a prayer towards that direction of how I want my life to look, who I want to be in that, what role I want to play in that. And I have a relative say in that, right? Like when we talk divine will, maybe I don't, but like in general, it's I get to play with that duality if that's the life that I choose to live. Otherwise, it's not dual and none of it matters, and I just get to be in divine will and ride the ride and appreciate life for all of it. And so coming back to that piece, it's like, what's the intention that I have here? Do I want to heal? Okay, great. Like, how can I look at what I want out of my day and my actions and my thoughts and my beliefs that affirm that story and that journey for me? If I want to expand on my sexuality, then what am I doing to make that my reality? Right? Am I going to Shibari workshops? Am I educating myself on kink? Am I connected with somebody, mentors, coaches, therapists, or whatever, that are in the relational space? Like, what is that? And that intention for me creates a lot of space and also an energetic direction that then I get to go and explore. So that also becomes ritual and devotion. It's like, what am I devoted to? And if I'm not devoted to myself in some way, this piece comes up for me. It's like, that's like a selfless act, and that can be beautiful. And I also just feel like, this might be a generalization, that it's very challenging to hold space when I do not know how to do that for myself. If I can't do it in the one and in the solo, it seems impossible to really truly offer the magnitude of what I have to others, because this is not grounded. I'm not solid in
You're
this.
a martyr.
Yeah. I don't even know if I answered your question, actually.
Well,
that took me on a whole journey.
Thank you. Thank you for your journey.
Thanks, everybody, for staying with me with that.
What I got was, it's seeing all aspects of your life as prayer, as devotional.
Yeah, I want to offer myself to the altar that is this life. I want the best for myself. I want to have the most amazing, beautiful, life-changing experiences. I don't ever want to walk through life and feel bored. I don't ever want to feel bored. If I'm feeling bored, that's a choice, right? I'm not choosing to expand. I'm comfortable and it's fine, but it's not really entertaining anymore. Like, I believe that my soul's journey is meant to be fun and is meant to be playful, and I'm meant to experience the full magnitude and capacity of everything so that my soul can experience the fullness of what it is to be in this body, on this planet, in this particular moment of time. Like, my soul could have incarnated, maybe did incarnate 100 years ago. Maybe this is the first incarnation. Doesn't feel like that. But maybe there will be more afterwards. But it's like, I want to play. I know that energy about myself. I want to play with energy. I want to play with dynamics. I want to play with myself. Right?
I want you to play with yourself too.
Thank you. In so many ways.
Yeah. And like,
that makes me the creator.
And so all of your day is opportunity to do that. And these ritualistic spaces are kind of like accentuation points to like a lightning rod, a divining rod, to kind of amplify that.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, here's a space to really drop into it at a deeper level than you can throughout the day. And that's the beauty of that.
Yeah. It's a sacred space.
Yeah.
Right? The altar is a sacred space. Life is a sacred space. You know, if we really only get this one in this body, and all of our memories from this particular journey are just like deja vu or something quantumly different, then I want to make the most out of it. And that comes from a place of passion and desire and curiosity at what can I actually do. If I could do anything, what could I do? And in order to explore that, I have to be willing to meet myself at the altar of myself and of other people and in their altars.
Right. Okay. And so sexual connection is kind of like this is this beautiful special, powerful, that's the word I'm looking for, space and opportunity to really put that into practice. Yeah.
Like if you think about having a self-ceremony where you go, you get something special from your altar, maybe you get it from nature like flowers, or you write a note to yourself and you put it in a space and you create a ceremony around the intention of exploring that, and you curate and create an environment that supports the exploration of that. There's no way that you would walk out of that experience being like, well, I regret that. Or I resent that. Like, God, I wish I'd never done that. Even if it's like really challenging and there's this part of us that's like, oh, fuck, kind of wish I hadn't gone there. Now I've opened Pandora's box. There's so much value in what comes out of those experiences, in my experience. And in anybody that I've worked with, any of my sisters or brothers that are in the work, like when they drop into ceremony, there are revelations that come out of that experience. Yeah. And that's just being in communion with yourself and or mystery, spirit, God, whatever you resonate with. It's like, poof. Sure. Okay, let's get real here. And then you get real here, and then you see what the fuck you're dealing with. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Now what do I want to do to move forward? What do I need in order to move forward? And then we get to give ourselves that because we are worthy, divine, abundant beings. We have access to all of that.
And I think that sexual connection is like nature's medicine, like of these tools. It's like the ayahuasca of physical, tangible, bodily embodiment.
Yeah. I mean, relationships are our most intimate mirrors. You know, just like ayahuasca is a mirror, San Pedro is a mirror, LSD is a mirror.
Yeah.
They all reflect.
And so the sexual connection for me is the same as that.
And to me, it almost, or maybe it does, feel like the most vulnerable. Sure. Just in the way in which society relates to sex and sexuality, especially with the influence of religion, it seems to be, at least in what I witnessed collectively, one of the most challenging aspects of a person's identity to relate to. It's the most vulnerable because everything else we can figure out. We can do on our own. You know, if we really want to, like mental stuff, we can figure it all out. We can grind. We can do whatever it is. But the second it comes to our sexuality, which naturally through our genomes has a pull and attraction towards other people, all of a sudden it's not about us anymore. It's like I can do all the healing work as a single woman and be like, I'm so ready for a relationship, blah, blah, blah. And then I walk into the door of a relationship. I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, maybe not as ready as I thought. Or like, get me
I
out
have
of
some
here.
blind spots.
Exactly. And that's a vulnerable space.
Yeah.
And of course I can see why couples and lovers find themselves in trigger, and especially without any awareness of how to regulate and be in those spaces and openly communicate and empathize, creates so much challenge. Yeah.
Guidance.
Yeah.
Like, how many people would have medicinal experiences? I know that we have, and I know that I have, but how many people would without the guidance and support of a shaman or
just brave souls out there? We're just like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. And then, this powerful medicine of sexual energy is freely available to everyone, but with no guidance.
Yeah.
So it's no wonder that.
I mean, that's kind of how we got here, right? What little guidance did we have into our sexuality in the first place? Like one class in 5th grade where they're like, this is a penis and this is a vagina, and don't have sex, you'll get STDs, and don't do drugs, and there's your lesson, you know? And so we have a culture and generations that relied on porn to teach them about sex. And there's such a, I see it so much right now. I get this so much in my inbox of men talking about their dependency on porn and wanting to come out of that because they're starting to feel that it robs from their ability to relate to women, but also to sex, because we've been sold a warped sense of sexuality and what it's supposed to look like. And so now there's a massive deconditioning that's starting to happen, which feels very vulnerable, and then trying to re-imprint new codes into our sexuality is such a venture.
Sure, I see that as the disconnect from the ritualistic aspect of sexual expression.
Because it became about gratification. Porn is all about gratification.
Right.
It's not like, let's make love. Actually, there are some independent filmmakers out there that do that.
Inevitably.
But yeah, it's like they are the 1% warriors that are fighting for ethical porn, you know, that want to convey the love
Give
story
us ethical
and the
porn.
romance. Yeah, we want more ethical porn.
Fine, we'll make some.
Yeah. But mainstream society was just like, no, gratification,
Sure, that's
taking, receiving.
That's how society's geared.
I mean, it matches so well with the swipe culture that we're in, right? It's like, I want
immediate gratification.
Yeah, I want immediate gratification. I want it now. I don't want to have to wait very long. I've got 10 minutes. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And yeah, even as I like say that out loud, I'm like, wow, the cap that puts on a person's experience is like, I feel for those people because it feels terrible. It's like it's such a limit on an expression that has infinite realities available to it and to the depths of whatever a person wants to explore.
Right.
So to be like, I'm just going to penetrate you so I can come. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
why? Like, that's the worst thing you could do, actually.
Well, it's like,
it's the least exciting.
Do you have sex how you use social media? That's like...
Ooh, that's a great question. Right? That's a great, reflective question.
That's kind of like the equivalent in my mind of what
I have sex like I use Do Not Disturb on my phone, which can be for hours at a time, you know.
All night long.
12 hours on
All
there.
night long.
Yeah. I'm like, do not disturb. I'm going somewhere for the next 4 hours. Do not text me. Do not call me. I am not available.
I'm in divine communion.
Yeah. But I love, that's like such a great modern question to like ground what we're talking about in the reality. Is like, do you have sex the way that you use social media? And like, what is that? You pull me towards you, do it. Wow, what you mean?